Welcome to another edition of HorseCenter, everyone. I am Brian Zipse, and as always, I have the great pleasure of being joined by my co-host to the East Coast. That's Matt Shifman. How are you today, Matt?
I'm pretty good, Brian. I'm just chilling. We got 3 weekends till a Triple Crown race. Hey, it's easy.
Easy. Hey, what'd you think of the Preakness, Matt? I'm on record as saying it was not a great Preakness, and I was very disappointed when I heard Coffee with Chris was not going to go after the lead. That ended up getting him last. I'm asking you the question, and I'm answering it for you, so I apologize. But the Preakness was a little bit of a letdown, although I guess the stretch battle between National Treasure and Blazing Sevens was at least a good stretch battle.
Yeah, it was a good stretch battle, but yeah, that was the weakest Preakness that I can remember in quite a while. I mean, 7 horses. I mean, I get it, stuff last minute dropouts, but 7 horses and horses that had only won a maiden race, and it just was. It was just a bad field, and I guess that kind of happens. But I don't know.
I have good news for you. The Belmont is shaping up much better.
Yeah, it certainly is. Why don't we talk about it?
Yeah, let's talk about it. Here's our cover boy for today. That's the Angel of Empire. He is one of many pointing for the Belmont Stakes. We're still just over 2 weeks away, Matt, June 10. And we're getting excited about the festival because the Belmont Stakes plus all those other races that weekend are really good. So we want to talk about the horses we're most looking forward to. Let's call it Belmont Stakes Festival 2023, Matt. And we'll start with the Belmont Stakes, the test of a champion. And we're seeing some horses that did not run in the Preakness here, which is a good thing. I guess with the lead horse, we're talking about a horse who didn't run in the first 2 legs in Forte.
Yeah, Brian, I hope that we can put all of the Forte drama behind us and we get to see Forte in a Triple Crown race finally. I mean, because we're talking about, at this point, the horse that probably is still the 3-year-old division leader, having not run in the Derby, having not run in the Preakness. At this point, usually the division leader is one of those 2 winners of the first 2 legs of the Triple Crown. But we go back to Forte and his great record, his 2 wins this year, last seen in the Florida Derby, champion 2-year-old. I'm looking forward to seeing him on the track.
Absolutely. It's been a while since we saw Forte on the track, since he beat Mage in the Florida Derby. Todd Pletcher, a trainer who has had great success in the Belmont Stakes, and he has 3 pretty nice horses here pointing for the Belmont at this point. Forte leads the way, as Matt said, a 2-year-old champion, done nothing wrong this year. You'd have to say Mage is the best horse from the Triple Crown series, although I guess he's the only horse that's running both legs of the Triple Crown so far, with a first and a good third after being a little bit pace hindered in a paceless Preakness. But Forte beat Mage twice down in Florida, and Forte looks on schedule to be in the Belmont, as is Tapit Trice, Matt. Tapit Trice had a winning streak going. Tampa Bay Derby, Bluegrass, prototypical Pletcher kind of Belmont horse. The son of Tapit looks pretty long-winded. Wasn't quite at his very best in the Kentucky Derby. Certainly, he's a horse to really pay attention to here in the Belmont.
Yeah, absolutely. Certainly one of those recent Pletchers that runs in the Derby. And this guy got, a decent enough 7th in the Kentucky Derby. We would have expected him to skip the Preakness for sure, unless he happened to have won the Derby and point to the 1.5-mile test of the champion. It looks like this Belmont Stakes, we're going to have a good handful of horses that ran in the Derby, a lot more than in the Preakness.
Yeah. Well, yeah, that's that's not saying a whole lot, Matt. But yeah, Tapit Trice was a little disappointing in the Kentucky Derby. But again, we've seen a lot of horses run like that in the Derby, then come to the different kind of track. Obviously, the different distance, going to 1.5 miles. Pletcher, big success, as we've talked about. So Tapestry certainly would be one of the ones you think could bounce back there. Kings Barnes will really need to bounce back because he didn't stick around long in the Kentucky Derby. But again, that pace in the Derby, the opposite of the Preakness, was too much, too fast, too early. Kings Barnes was a big part of that. The Louisiana Derby winner. Granted, he got out there with a pretty easy pace himself in the Louisiana Derby, but he looks like the one of the Pletcher trio that will be out there early.
Yeah, and certainly that running style is much more of a positive factor in the Belmont Stakes than necessarily in the Kentucky Derby. We're talking about not having that big field and having to deal with all that's involved with that. He was a lightly raced horse going into the Derby at 3 for 3. The kind of speed that he has will probably keep him closer to the pace in the Belmont Stakes, and typically that's the kind of style that's most effective.
Yeah, although it could be a little bit different this year because the next two horses on the list we have for here, our early top contender list for the Belmont Stakes, Matt, are both trained by Bob Baffert, and they both have speed. Of course, it's led by the Preakness winner, National Treasure. 113 and change he only needed to run to have a pretty good lead in the Preakness early. But he's got natural speed. Maybe not as much as Kings Barnes, maybe not as much as the other Baffert horse listed as a real possible here for the Belmont, Arabian Lion. But in these last three horses we've talked about, Kings Barnes, National Treasure, and Arabian Lion, we could actually see a legitimate pace in the Belmont.
Yeah, we certainly could. And you mentioned Arabian Lion, who won the Sir Barton Stakes on Preakness weekend. I think at some point, Arabian Lion was maybe the number one prospect from the Baffert barn, and now maybe Arabian Lion is getting back to the talent that he flashed earlier on.
Yeah, I thought it was Arabian Night, but maybe Arabian Lion is the Arabian Baffert runner. After all, he won easy. I do think National Treasure and Arabian Lion kind of had things easy on Preakness Day, and they impressed though. Arabian Lion ran fast. National Treasure showed that he is not afraid to battle and go a pretty good distance at ground. So I don't want to take too much away from what National Treasure accomplished, or Blazing Sevens, or Mage in the Preakness. But things will be a little bit different, at least. It looks like there's some speed in here, so that's interesting. One horse I'm not really hearing much talk about was our cover boy, Angel of Empire, Matt. And I think when the past performances come out, when this race is drawn, Angel of Empire's got to be one of the favorites. People seem to love to bet horses that finish strongly in the 10 furlong Kentucky Derby when they come back in the 12 furlong Belmont.
Yeah, and add in there, Brian, that this is a Brad Cox runner, and add in there heading into the Kentucky Derby, the horse had 2 nice wins on the Derby Trail. Third place performance, as you mentioned, was good, making up ground. Wasn't going to get to the top 2, but making up ground in there.
Yeah, well, as big a fan of Two Phils as I am, Two Phils became my number one horse after some scratches. Angel of Empire was getting to him late in the Derby. He was going to be second pretty quick after the wire. Angel of Empire really did run a very good Kentucky Derby. And let's not forget, Matt, Angel of Empire was actually the favorite in that Kentucky Derby. Horses were scratched, but he was the favorite. He ran a good race. And again, I think people like those horses who rally in the Derby. Another horse from Brad Cox who ran well, both in New York and in the Derby, was Hit Show. Hit Show kind of stayed in touch the entire race. He wasn't all that far off of the early pace in the Kentucky Derby. Again, a fast early pace, and he stayed on well to finish 5th in the Kentucky Derby.
Yeah, and as you mentioned, I think earlier in the show, a lot of these horses that run well in the Derby and a 5th place finish in the Kentucky Derby, in my eyes, is running well. Come back and do good things later on in the year. So for hit show. It's just a skip of the Preakness and on to the Belmont Stakes.
Yeah, let's look at who else we have on this list, Matt. Arcangelo, all these are big trainers on the list except for Arcangelo. He's an interesting horse, though, getting better and better, coming off a nice, determined win in the Peter Pan.
Yeah, absolutely. And for a trainer, a very good trainer in Jenna Antonucci, who you have to say is a low profile trainer compared to when you talk about Pletcher and Baffert and Brad Cox. It's tough for these kind of low profile trainers to get a quality horse, to get a stakes winner, to get a legitimate contender in the Belmont Stakes. She's a veteran trainer and a good trainer.
Yeah, that's one of the reasons I was rooting so hard for two Phils, I think, in the Kentucky Derby was the connections. Larry Ravelli, I've watched Larry Ravelli for years up in Chicago, and it was nice to see two Phils run such a Kentucky Derby. There are others pointing for the Belmont. Right now, the list is around a dozen, but those are the 8 horses that we wanted to highlight in our early look at the Belmont Stakes. But we want to highlight some other races, Matt, that we are excited about. The Met Mile is always huge, and we're going to talk about that a little bit later. But let's give the ladies some love here, Matt. We like to do that, and these are short lists. Again, we're looking at the horses that are highlighting the race early on here, 2 weeks out. But this Just a Game could be a real corker, Matt. We always like to talk turf, and Just a Game was a wonderful turf female back in the day, way back in the day. And I'm going back probably about 4 decades now on Just a Game, but she was a great turf filly who liked middle distances. And I think we've highlighted 3 here that you can say the same about. In Italian has gotten really good. She lost this race last year. She's a speed filly for Chad Brown, of course, a speed mare for Chad Brown, of course. She lost this race last year, but if you look at her last 3 races at Keeneland, Matt, she's it's hard to argue that she's not the best turf female in the country right now.
Yeah, absolutely. Certainly a horse that's gotten better as she's gotten older for Chad Brown. The Just a Game's a grade 1. It's one of 9 grade 1s over the 3-day Belmont Racing Festival. Over $7 million in purse money. In Italian, won Jenny Wiley most recently at Keeneland's, got a couple of grade 1 wins in her resume last year, and ran a good second in the Breeders' Cup Filly and Mare Turf in November.
Yeah, well, yeah, I was talking about 3 races at Keeneland, and those are them, Matt. She won a grade 1 early this year. She won a little over a month ago this year. She won a grade 1 in her second to last start at Keeneland, the first lady there last year. And of course, she ran a bang up race stretching out to a mile 3/16 in the Breeders' Cup Filly and Mare Turf to run second. So in Italian, looks like a legit favorite in the Just a Game. But I want to talk about Spenderella for a little bit. Spenderella, still rather lightly raced for Graham Motion, but she's just been terrific. She hasn't run a bad race. She did get beat in her 4-year-old debut, which was a little bit of a surprise, but maybe it's set up for the filly that beat her that day. Spenderella, including a really nice trip to Ascot last year, has just been a consistent as a rock turf filly, and she's another one that I think could be the best turf female in the country.
Yeah, and a really good traveler for Graham Motion. You mentioned going overseas. She also had a big grade 1 win out in California in the Del Mar Oaks, and in that comeback race, it's not so bad when you mention that she got beat by a Chad Brown turf horse.
Chad Brown turf horse, who would that be? It would be none other than Fluffy Socks. I know Fluffy Socks is a multiple graded stakes winning turf female who people love to root for a little bit. I think partly because of the name Fluffy Socks. What a great name for a turf horse. Anyway, she came flying, and it was actually her seasonal debut last time in that Distaff Turf Mile, which easily could be a grade one. I guess it was a grade two this year. Fluffy Socks came rolling late. She had been knocking on the door so many times since winning a graded stakes at Saratoga more than a year ago. And she was just one of those horses. When is she going to break through? And she did in a big way at Churchill Downs last time.
Yeah, and it had been about a year and a half since Fluffy Socks had recorded a victory, and the 5-year-old mare now has, for today's world, has run a lot with 18 starts and 5 wins and 7 seconds and a couple of thirds. As you said, has been knocking on the door and got that big win in her seasonal debut.
Yeah, she broke through. One of those horses you said, when is she going to break through? She did for sure. An impressive late run there in the Distaff Turf Mile, and the Just a Game. Maybe not one of the marquee races of a huge couple days at Belmont Park, but it looks good this year, and it usually is good. I remember watching Tepin do her thing there not that long ago. Good memories. Anyway, back to the show. We also want to talk about the dirt females, Matt. Excuse me, because the Ogden Phipps has become one of the best older female races of the year. This year should be no exception. Again, we will see others in here, but we wanted to highlight the biggest names. And you know how I feel about Secret Oath. I have a feeling she's going to stay at Churchill Downs, but if she shows up, she only adds to this. But we had to talk about Clairiere and Nest. Clairiere, of course, a wonderful 5-year-old now trained by Steve Asmussen. Barely missed in the last 2 editions of the Breeders' Cup Distaff. She got a nice win last time at Oaklawn Park.
Yeah, winning the Apple Blossom, getting another grade 1 victory for Clairiere, who, let's face it, dances every dance, faces all the toughest horses in her division, including winning this Ogden Phipps last year. 18 starts, 7 wins, 5 seconds, 3 thirds. She's right there every time.
Yeah, she's the defending race champion. As you mentioned, she beat some good horses last year. She'll have to beat some good horses this year. Nest was a terrific 3-year-old. In fact, she was the 3-year-old filly champion with a bunch of big wins last year, Matt, in Kentucky and especially up in Saratoga. We haven't seen her since she finished 1 spot behind Clairiere last year in the Breeders' Cup Distaff. But we've known for a while that this was the race where we expected to see Nest return. And as far as I know, it looks like Nest will make her return to the races in the Ogden Phipps.
Yeah, that's for sure. She's and Nest is the winner of 3 grade 1s last year. And don't forget, she likes to run on Belmont Stakes weekend. She likes the track, and remember that second place finish against the boys in the Belmont Stakes when she was so impressive.
Oh, that's a good point, Matt. I'm glad you brought that up because maybe her best race wasn't the 3 grade 1 wins last year. Maybe it was that slightly troubled second place on this same weekend in the big one, the Belmont Stakes last year. Nest, we're really looking forward to her return, and the Ogden Phipps. That could make the Ogden Phipps just a huge race. All right, now one big other race we wanted to highlight, and it's, to tell you the truth, I hate to say it because the Belmont Stakes is part of the Triple Crown, and we're conditioned to, call the Triple Crown everything about at least the first half of the year, at least pre-Breeders' Cup. But I just always like the Met Mile. The Met Mile is truly one of my favorite races, and this year I think we could be in for something special. I just got to notice that Bill Mott is now the new trainer of Rich Strike, Matt. I don't know if you saw that as well. Bill Mott is the new trainer of Rich Strike. Bill Mott also has the first 2 horses on our list here for the Met Mile, an early look. Cody's Wish, what a wonderful story, and Cody's Wish has come back good.
Oh, he sure has, Brian. And you took the words out of my mouth before. If you hadn't said that the Met Mile's one of your favorite races, I was going to say, hey, I know Zipse loves the Met Mile. And I know I sat with him when he had some of his big wins in his bets on the Met Mile. Anyway, we'll get to that in subsequent shows leading up to the big racing festival. Yet Cody's Wish getting back to now, Brian, 5 wins in a row, and 8 out of his last 9 were trips to the winner's circle for this 5-year-old who is getting better with age for sure. 12 wins, 8 wins, as I mentioned, hits the board in all of them with 1.7 million in earnings.
Yeah, Cody's Wish, also a wonderful story. Picking the young boy out at the farm, and Cody's Wish racing for Cody's Wish, if you will, and just doing such a great job. Of course, the Breeders' Cup Dirt Mile last year, and he returned in style, looking like a powerful older male. It's nice to see these older males being able to run in their maturity, and Cody's Wish could just be a monster this year, even better than he was, and he was really good last year. A lot of what we just said, maybe not the story, but a lot of what we just said could be true for Elite Power. Elite Power was also a Breeders' Cup winner, an impressive winner of the Breeders' Cup Sprint last year. He's got a great record as well. He came back this year over in Saudi Arabia, Matt, and he looked so impressive winning over there. So both of these Bill Mott one-turn stars have had one race this year, and they looked really, really good.
Yeah, last year's champion sprinter, as you mentioned, Bill Mott again, won the Breeders' Cup Sprint, has won 6 races in a row now. Another horse that's gotten better and better as he has gotten older. 9 starts, 6 wins, and 1/3, over 2 million in earnings for a sprinter. That's pretty darn good.
Yeah, and he's got that kind of powerful closing kick, maybe even more so than Cody's Wish, although Cody's Wish, the way he's finished off his last few have been so impressive. But Elite Power just pounces on his competition in the stretch, and it's impressive. Speaking of impressive, Repo Rocks. We never thought Repo Rocks would be a horse we're talking about more than 2 weeks out of a big race, but just running big of late for trainer Jamie Ness. And I guess that was his best performance last time when he rolled in the Westchester and looked like a horse every bit who could win the Met Mile.
Yeah, absolutely, Brian. The winner of 5 out of his last 6 starts, some of them, in winter racing at Aqueduct. His only loss in that stretch of 6 races was a second in a good edition of the Carter Handicap. He won the Westchester last time, which is the Belmont Park prep race, going that 1-turn mile for the Met Mile, coming from the barn of Jamie Ness, who has him coming like a broken record again, but running the best of his career, a career that includes 35 starts, Brian, 35 and 9 wins.
Yeah. We have some streaking horses at the top of the list. Taba's not streaking, I guess, because he's been beaten in his last start. We have the American starts up there, and of course, he was a nice winner of the Grade 1 Malibu. A lot of people thought that Grade 1 win in the Malibu might get him an Eclipse Award. It didn't, of course. Epicenter won that 3-year-old championship last year, but Taba was excellent last year, and he's had 1 start this year. It was disappointing overseas, but a 1 mile, 1-turn, 1 mile. Taba is a class horse who ran in a lot of big races last year, ran really well in a lot of big races. Taba, it sounds like he is going to run in the Met Mile last I heard. So Taba is a very interesting horse on this list as well.
Yeah, interesting for sure. Big wins in the Santa Anita Derby, before the Derby, and then later in the year in the Pennsylvania Derby. Over $2 million in earnings. Guess we could draw a line through the trip over to Saudi for the Saudi Cup. He just it wasn't to his liking.
Wasn't his day there for sure. A bunch of other interesting horses here, some for different reasons. Smile Happy, if he goes in the race, I think Smile Happy would be a big threat as well. Of all the horses we list here, though, kind of have a feeling that he is more likely to stay at Churchill Downs, but maybe Ken McPeak will want to separate his top older horses, Rattle and Roll, and run him into Stephen Foster. And Smile Happy will indeed run in the Met Mile, but really nice win last time in the Alice Sheba.
Yeah, a sort of signal that maybe we're gonna get back to seeing the best from Smile Happy. As a 2-year-old, won the Kentucky Jockey Club. As a 3-year-old, was second in the Bluegrass. Horse has only run 8 times, but 4 wins, 2 seconds, and a third. Over $1 million in earnings. Hopefully, McPeak can keep him on the track a little bit more this year.
Yeah, Smile Happy has never really run a bad race, and happily he had some nice odds in that Alice Sheba win. We'll see if he comes to New York for the Met Mile, but he would be very interesting. White Barrio, I guess of all the horses on this list, he might be the one that I like the least in the Met Mile. But on the other hand, he's a Grade 1 winner. He's coming off a nice win. He's got some tactical speed. He's got talent. He's also got a brand new trainer, and it's an interesting story there, that trainer change.
Yeah, it sure is. From Safi Joseph's barn, Safi embroiled in issues surrounding his horses during Kentucky Derby week, transferred to the barn of Rick Dutrow, a name that is associated with controversy himself.
Yeah, you can't make this stuff up. Dutrow, coming off a long suspension, is back, and always a good horseman, and always a top trainer. So White Barrio goes from Safi Joseph. Safi Joseph, of course, had 2 rather strange horses collapse and die. Strange circumstances, I should say, when they collapsed and died for not obvious reasons at Churchill Downs before the Derby, and he was banned. Lord Miles couldn't run. White Barrio would have run in that card as well, but White Barrio would be another interesting horse, as is Doppelganger. Doppelganger is a horse who I thought had talent early on in his career. Matt out west. Brittany Russell, who's been making a lot of noise in the Mid-Atlantic of late. Doppelganger came up, and you mentioned Repo Rocks has only been beaten once late. That's because Doppelganger closed like a rocket in that Grade 1 Carter.
Yeah, Brittany Russell has been dominating the Mid-Atlantic, particularly based at Laurel Park. But she's not afraid to ship into New York when she's got a horse that's ready for a big performance in a stakes race, and got that Grade 1 win with a big performance in the Carter.
Yeah, it was a big performance. It was a big finish. It was big odds. It was big all the way around. And I think Doppelganger might be a horse who can actually live up to pulling off a big upset with future strong performances. Like I said, I always thought he had potential, and it looks like he's living up to that. At least he did in the Grade 1 Carter last time. All right, folks, that's 20 horses that Matt and I are really excited about. Belmont Stakes weekend, the Belmont Stakes, we mentioned the Just a Game on turf, and the Ogden Phipps on dirt for the females, and of course the Met Mile, which we love. So that's it for the show, Matt. But before we go, we need to get a parting shot from you, my friend.
Yeah, and we'll be back. We'll have 2 more shows before the Festival of Racing, before the Belmont Stakes. We'll talk about a bunch more of those Grade 1 races, see what other kind of horses fill in. Hey, great racing at Belmont Park coming up to finish out the Triple Crown races.
Yeah, and there's some good racing this weekend heading into Memorial Day Monday, so don't miss that, especially out down in Texas. Lone Star has a big day on Monday, as does Santa Anita Hollywood Gold Cup Day out there. So holiday racing, enjoy your Memorial Day. Thanks everyone for watching. We always appreciate you here tuning in on HorseCenter. Hit all those notification subscribe buttons for us. Give us a thumbs up. Give us a comment. It always helps. Thanks to our sponsor, the best contest site out there. That's Derby Wars. Matt and I look forward to being back with you right here next week on Horse Center. See you then.